Hi everybody, I'm Henk van Rijn, Research Programme Manager at Howell Marine Consulting. I am one of the ECOWind Programme Champions, working alongside academia, research and government to deliver high-impact, policy-relevant research outputs from the three projects in the programme, while also building healthy, respectful working relationships between these sectors. I'm going to share a little bit about what we're doing to support the development of current future site access arrangements for research in the UK. And then afterwards, we can open up for some questions and a little discussion. Okay, so ECOWind's research is focused on offshore wind farms. And it's aiming to understand how offshore wind farms affect ecosystems and the species and habitats that make them. And by better understanding these effects, to use this knowledge to influence the development of policies, reduce negative impacts on marine life, while also tackling climate change. So why do we collect data from wind farms, and how do we do it? So in order to understand the impacts of offshore wind farms on our environment, it's essential to collect environmental data. You can model some bits, but you need that data from areas immediately adjacent to and around the wind turbines. Now, a wide variety of approaches are out there for collecting this data, as I'm sure you all know, and each of these approaches can depends largely on what it is that you want to identify, what it is you want to measure, how frequently you're going to do it, and to a large extent it also depends on your budget. So I'll give you some examples here just to see the range of things that are out there. So our Accelerate project is aiming to understand the effects that the turbines and array design have on sediment transport, habitat stability, dependent biological communities, among other things that the research is doing. So to build this understanding, they will be collecting information, acoustic surveys that will map the bed forms around turbines. And then backing this up with the collection of physical samples through sediment grabs, trawls, underwater cameras, and these will verify areas in the map. And they'll be using some ADC acoustic Doppler current profiler measurements to get an idea of the currents, and bringing it all together. This will provide the necessary information about bed forms and the biological community that's living on the seabed. Now, a slightly different approach, a different project, is the ECOWIND project. Here they're aiming to understand the effects that turbines have on local predator-prey dynamics. So for predators, we're thinking seabirds, and for the prey, we're talking fish. And so how ECOWIND will be collecting the data here, they're using some very novel approaches here. So uncrewed surface vehicles that will be collecting some acoustic information, as well as autonomous underwater vehicles will be cruising around. And these will collect information on the fish. And then for the seabirds, they'll be using aerial surveys from light aircraft. And the Pelagio project, for final example here, is another approach again. Here they're aiming to understand the effect that the turbines have on water column processes, things like mixing, and how this will affect the nutrient availability and the entire food chain, right the way from plankton all the way upwards. So for this, they need to collect a lot of water movement type data. They'll be using acoustic Doppler current profilers here that will be mounted on seabed landers, as well as underwater gliders, which are a type of autonomous underwater vehicle. And then, for the plankton, the fish, the mammal data, these would be sort of evidence collected there from static acoustic equipment and fluorometers mounted also on the landers. So these are just some of the questions being tackled and the approaches taken by the ECOWind program. But as you know, there are many others. Many other approaches and questions across the other researcher projects in the UK. Now here at the ScotMER Symposium, you will have heard from many of them, I'm sure, and through this hopefully gain an appreciation of the ambition but the scale of the work that the research community is planning around offshore wind farms. However, getting safe access to wind farms for research purposes is not straightforward. There are numerous risks with offshore work. Weather is a big one, but these are increased when you've got large-scale infrastructure, you've got large vessels, you've got small vessels, you've got multiple parties all involved. These safety concerns are shouldered by the offshore developers. They have a duty of care over researchers' safety while working at their site. So site access agreements must be brokered between the researchers and the developers with the appropriate operational safety mitigation measures put into place to ensure that not only the safety needs are met, but also that the research objectives can be delivered. These two communities will be working together for the next 30 years to deliver the British energy security strategy targets, as well as net zero ambitions. So for this all to work smoothly, it's essential that site access agreements reflect not just the construction developmental pressures and safety requirements of the development and growth of wind farms all over the UK, but also the scientific evidence needs of the policies, which are largely met by the researchers and the research, so that we can overall deliver the required evidence needed to support de-risking of offshore wind, planning and consenting, and the delivery of strategic compensation and marine net gain. So there is a strong need to work together in this, and like I said, it will be for the next 30 years at least. So how do we work better together? Well, Howell Marine, with the support of the Crown Estate, are leading a process under the ECOWind Programme to bring together academic researchers and offshore developers to build an understanding around the needs and requirements of site access at offshore wind farms across the current but also future offshore wind research projects in the UK. So we've already reached out to a large number of people across research programs and companies across the UK to include the views of the developer and the academic community, and also to get as wide a range of views as possible. We sent them out some questionnaires. Each set of questionnaires have been slightly tailored to what we believe are the needs and understanding needed of those communities. And the views we collect from the questionnaires, these will be shared and discussed at a site access workshop. It's to be held in just a few weeks' time at the Crown Estate offices. At the workshop, we're aiming to build an understanding of each community's requirements and their needs, and that are necessary to progress the development of agreed ways of working in the future. Now, I can't tell you what's in the questionnaire results yet. It's only a couple more weeks to wait, but if you're interested, please get involved. In the meantime, though, I can tell you about some of the questions that we've asked. So for starters, we asked some questions around the perceived benefits or impacts of environmental research. We also asked for any sort of indicators of which areas would be priorities of interest for research. We asked quite a few more technical questions, really getting to the nub of things around site access, particularly focused during the construction and the operational phases of the wind farms. This is where there's a lot of interest at the moment. And these questions were sort of spread around, some of them looking at the proximities that are safe to get various pieces of survey equipment deployed, and also the aspirations, desires of the researchers. How close do they want to get their equipment? We also asked how often do researchers want to deploy their survey equipment? For how long do they want to run the surveys for? And then on the flip side, what are the risks associated with that? What level of risk is posed by the deployment of these various pieces of equipment. Then sort of stepping back and thinking about the survey guidelines and procedures. Which of these are being followed in the research? And you'd hope there would be procedures that would involve and build in scientific rigor, but also safety in their application. Also asking, have the researchers got prior experience working offshore, and especially in collaboration with offshore industries? And many of them have worked previously with oil and gas, for example. So we want to draw that out. And finally, leading up to where we're all going with this is, what are the preferred ways of working of the two communities? And how do people want to progress this? So going forward, we think it's essential that the process is jointly led and shaped by the academic research and the offshore wind farm developer communities. But we also think it's going to need the support of government regulators, seabed license owners, including but not exclusively organisations such as the Crown Estate Scotland, DEFRA, BAYS, NERC and Marine Scotland. And collectively, I mean, I'm a hopeful person, I always am, but we really want this process to achieve outcomes that are jointly beneficial and that lead to prosperous long-term working relationships in the offshore energy sector. So as ECOWind Champions, the Howell Marine team are keen to engage with offshore wind developers, with academic researchers, all working with wind. If you are interested in following this process or even getting involved, please get in touch with us at the champions at ecowind.uk, email address on the slide there. I hope you found this interesting and useful. Thanks very much for listening.